Why have I asked my HVAC guy I found on Angie.com to change my grandpa's trachea tube? I was so amazed at how he replaced our air ducts. I knew I could trust him to change Pop Pop's tube.
I think we should call a doctor.
Angie, the one you trust to find the ones you trust. Find pros for all your home projects at Angie.com.
39-year-old Jenica Campbell had her whole day planned out. It was March 29th, 2021. First, she cooked eggs and bacon for her 4 daughters. The girls, ages 17, 14, 12, and 10, were going back to school after spring break had just ended. After breakfast, Jenica went to donate plasma. Next on her itinerary, she needed to finish shopping for her daughter's Easter baskets for the upcoming holiday, and then a trip to Walmart to pick something up. That's why Jenica was driving on State Road 46 when she noticed something horrific. A man lying on the ground. The man was 73-year-old Vincent Russo. He had been riding his motorcycle when a car hit him and then drove away. Jenica pulled over to help. Others gathered around too. Firefighters and police were beginning to arrive. What happened next? No one could predict. A witness described what happened as the hit-and-run driver returned to the crash site, the car barreling right towards them.
The same car came from this, heading westbound on 46 at a very high rate of speed, jumped the curb, and plowed into a lady that was trying to administer aid to the motorcyclist.
As people scrambled to get out of the way, the driver drove into Jenica Campbell, sending her flying into the air. She died at the scene, even as a firefighter paramedic performed CPR to try and revive her. Years later, nobody debated the facts of that day in a Seminole County, Florida courtroom as the families of Vincent Russo and Jenica Campbell sought justice.
I'm not going to mince words. This is a tragedy. There are 2 people dead. I'm also further not going to mince words. Mr. Kraft caused those deaths.
Both the prosecution and the defense agreed that 37-year-old Michael Kraft was the hit-and-run driver that killed both Vincent Russo and Jenica Campbell. But why? That's where the prosecution and the defense differed.
And I know it sounds crazy, because it is. That's the whole point. It's crazy.
This is Jillian in partnership with Law and Crime. You are listening to Court Junkie. When your sheets start failing you, it's never usually something that happens all of a sudden. It's the small things you start noticing. Like they start to feel scratchy or they start pilling. Or maybe you just start waking up in a sweat, more uncomfortable than you're used to. If your sheets are pilling, thinning, slipping, or overheating, that's your sign that it's time to upgrade to Boll & Branch. You guys know I'm a huge fan of Boll & Branch. Boll & Branch's signature sheets are made from 100% organic cotton and designed to hold their shape, stay breathable, and feel luxuriously soft night after night. We also have their waffle blanket, which is a relatively new addition to our bed set, but it's light, perfectly soft, and like the sheets, gets even softer after every wash. I swear it's not just in my head. My Oura Ring even tells me that I've been sleeping better, and I think that it's all thanks to Boll & Branch. Sleep sound with Boll & Branch. Get 15% off your first order plus free shipping at bollandbranch.com/court with the code COURT. That's Boll & Branch, BOLLAND, branch.com/court, code COURT to unlock 15% off. Exclusions apply. Last year, my health goals centered around working out and getting into shape through going to the gym and lifting weights. This year, in 2026, I am stepping up my nutrition. I'm keeping track of what I eat and trying to put healthy things into my body. One thing I've added to my daily routine is a post-workout Kachava smoothie. Kachava is an all-in-one nutrition shake crafted with the highest quality ingredients. No artificial flavors, colors, or sweeteners. Non-GMO, no soy, no animal products, no gluten, and no preservatives. It's a whole body meal with plant-based protein that actually tastes delicious. My go-to is the chocolate flavor, and then I like to add ice, a banana, and on some days, a tiny little splash of peanut butter. It's so yummy, and it really helps give me a nice energy boost for the rest of my day. Just 2 scoops provide 25 grams of protein, 6 grams of fiber, greens, adaptogens, and so much more. And if chocolate isn't your thing, they also have vanilla, chai, matcha, coconut acai, and strawberry. And best of all, you can try Kachava risk-free with their Love It guarantee. Stick with your wellness goals. Go to kachava.com and use the code COURT for 15% off. That's Kachava, KACHAVA.com, code COURT. Around lunchtime on March 29th, 2021, everybody had a destination to get to while driving on State Road 46. Whether it was to pick up kids from school, go to a medical appointment, or run an errand. And as fate would have it, those on the road at that time would witness Michael Kraft's erratic driving. Born and raised in Central Florida, a witness named Richard was heading east when he saw Vincent get clipped by the bluish-gray car. He called 911 to immediately report the crash. 4 years after the collision, Richard was in the courtroom as a witness and used a laser pointer on a map to tell the jury what happened.
Coming from there, and the vehicle came like this, and the motorcycle was right there, and he clipped him, looked like he hit him on the side. The side of it, and hit it.
Okay. And when he hit the motorcycle, what happened to the motorcyclist?
He was down.
Now, what did the driver of the blue car do after that?
Kept traveling eastbound on 46.
Okay. Did he stop at all?
Nope.
And can you describe how fast he was going by any chance?
I don't know.
Do you recall the driving pattern?
Not safe.
The prosecution played a recording of the 911 call where Richard reported seeing the motorcyclist lying on the ground. Vincent, who hadn't been wearing a helmet, wasn't moving. He wasn't alone. About a half dozen passersby had stopped to help. The fire trucks had just arrived, and police were on their way. Richard parked his truck and stood on the sidewalk. He described how the same car then came back and how he and some others jumped behind the barrier. He described what he heard as the car went over the median.
And what kind of sound do you think, can you describe that sound to be?
Engine rev, the undercarriage hitting the raised median.
Richard didn't actually see the collision when Jenica was struck, but he heard the awful sounds. He was in shock. He couldn't believe what had actually happened. In a span of around 5 minutes or so, 2 people had been hit. Also going eastbound that day was Elizabeth, who was going with her family to take her uncle to the doctor. Elizabeth's cousin, who was driving, swerved to avoid the bluish-gray car that was coming straight at them. She looked in the rearview mirror and saw the car run into the motorcyclist. The car didn't stop, but kept going, and then made a U-turn to go back west on State Road 46 to return back to the crash. Elizabeth also called 911. She testified that traffic was moderate that day, and the blue car was all over the road and going at a high rate of speed. A woman named Tara, who was picking up her daughter from school, also stopped and called 911.
And as I was standing there, I was on the phone with my partner explaining that she would need to go and get my daughter from school when I heard the revving of an engine, which was not expected, obviously, because traffic was crawling by because of the situation. The revving of the engine made me look up, and as I looked up, I was looking in this direction, and the silver blue vehicle came up in the left lane, avoided the traffic that had stopped by going into the left turn lane, crossed the median, and was heading directly for this corner where the group of folks and myself were standing. And when he was right about here, he moved to the right and went directly for the motorcyclist that was still right there.
Okay, and what did you see the car do as it relates to the motorcyclist?
As he was heading towards the motorcyclist, he hit the motorcyclist essentially dead on,
Okay.
and struck him again.
And then she saw the car hit Jenica, going around 35 miles per hour. The car then sped away before crashing into a security fence and coming to a stop in a ditch. Sanford police officer Christopher French approached with his gun out. Footage from his body camera was played for the court. The jury heard him yelling repeatedly, "Get on the ground now." Officer French eventually handcuffed Michael Kraft and dragged him up the ditch and onto the sidewalk. Michael wasn't answering his questions.
Officer, did you notice anything unusual about the defendant or his demeanor after you extracted him from the vehicle?
Yes. I observed the defendant to be very lethargic. He had dry mouth. He was sweating profusely. Sometimes he would mumble things that were incoherent, couldn't quite understand what he was saying. And I noticed that his eyes were bloodshot.
Okay. Did you notice anything about his teeth?
I did notice that they were chattering a little bit, and he was very disheveled.
Did he respond to your commands?
Sometimes he did, sometimes he just sat there, laid there, didn't really say anything or do anything, at which point I had to assist him with what I wanted him to do.
Okay. So after you had secured him in cuffs, what did you do next?
I searched his person for obviously any contraband or anything that would be a danger to myself or others. I asked if he needed medical attention. He wouldn't respond to me due to the circumstances of the crash and where his vehicle was. And the way he was acting, I had the fire department respond to the scene.
Okay. And did they respond?
Eventually, yes.
Okay. And what happened after they got there?
I got him up off of the ground, placed him into the back of my patrol vehicle. The fire department arrived, took him, and put him in the back of the ambulance to assess him for any of the injuries that he may have had.
Have you ever seen anything like this?
I've seen some pretty bad stuff, yes.
Anything quite like this happening on a routine response to a traffic crash?
No.
Officer French testified that he suspected Michael was on drugs. On cross, the defense pointed out that Michael had been driving about 40 miles per hour when he crashed into the ditch.
I think it's fair to say, we saw the video, that Mr. Kraft had just been in a pretty major car accident, right?
I wouldn't necessarily say major car accident, but it was in a car accident, yes, ma'am.
Not a tiny car accident, though, correct?
I think our definitions of accidents are going to vary, but he was in a car accident, yes. I wouldn't say a major car accident.
Okay. Well, you said he was going pretty fast, 40 to 45 miles an hour. He struck a ditch, right?
Yes.
Okay. Before that, 2 people were struck by that vehicle, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. As part of your investigation and kind of evaluation of Mr. Kraft, I know you're not a doctor, but was there any sort of like concussion protocol or anything like that that you did to make sure that he wasn't impaired with a concussion?
Typically, obviously I'm not a medical personnel, but we just do basic life support. So if they're breathing, if they're moving around, then obviously I know that they're not severely injured. And we just get the rescue to come to our scene to evaluate them further since they have the training for that.
Understood. But you personally don't know if he had a concussion or anything like that at the time, correct?
I do not.
Okay. And as we saw in the video, Mr. Kraft, when he was taken from that vehicle, he was in distress. Is that fair to say?
I would say that he was panicked. I mean, obviously anybody who has a gun pointed at him would be in a panic. Yes, ma'am.
For sure. And I'm sure you're familiar with adrenaline and how that basically works, right?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. So he definitely was maybe in an anxious state. Is that fair to say?
Considering what all just transpired, I would say yes.
Okay.
Michael's attorney asked him about Michael's demeanor.
It'd be fair to say that he was acting a little bit unusual, right?
Define unusual.
Well, he wasn't acting as just a normal, everyday person at that time, was he?
I mean, he was acting as if I would expect somebody to act if they were just involved in a situation like that and they had a gun pointed at him. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And I think you actually stated on direct that it was unusual behavior to the state attorney, did you not?
What specific part was unusual? Because there are certain aspects of his demeanor that were unusual, but there were some aspects that weren't unusual.
That's okay. I can kind of go through it. He was lethargic, right?
At the beginning, no.
Okay, not at the beginning. So let's kind of maybe move a little past that initial stage of adrenaline,
Okay.
that moment of distress that Mr. Kraft had, and kind of go throughout that investigation that we saw in the video. Was he kind of mumbling?
He was mumbling, yes, ma'am.
Okay, so not making a whole lot of sense, correct?
When he was laying on the sidewalk, he was mumbling things that I could not perceive what he was trying to say.
Sanford police officer Sean Hill interviewed Michael too.
So do you recall anything that happened from the crash itself today?
What crash?
The crash that you were involved in driving your car?
I was being chased and I'm trying to get to Forward City.
Okay.
And I was told I had to go through the gate. And somebody ran into the back of me when I attempted to do it.
Okay.
And then I tried to go through it and get out of the exit.
Okay.
Because they didn't know how to get out there.
Okay. Do you recall, you said it earlier that you had a vehicle chasing you?
Yes.
Do you recall what kind of vehicle was that was chasing you?
No.
Okay. All right.
Michael claimed that somebody had rammed him, he didn't know who, and was chasing him until he crashed into the gate and went into the ditch. As he spoke with authorities, he appeared lucid. He recited his phone number when asked. He said he had bought the car from his brother-in-law and knew his brother-in-law's name. At other times, however, Michael sounded delusional. In this clip, you can hear him tell the officer that he is legally incapacitated.
So based on the information provided by everybody that was on scene, to include witnesses that were here to witness your crash, and the totality of that circumstance, you're found to be at fault for the crash. So the crash itself is found to be yours and yours alone. Okay.
One person that ran me from behind.
No, sir. No, that you were involved in a motor vehicle crash that struck a person.
Okay.
Okay. So based on all that information, you are being found at fault for the crash. Okay, so you're receiving some citations, and we'll get you some paperwork for the actual documentation itself, for like car insurance and people that were involved in all that stuff. We'll get you that paperwork for that. So what we're going to do now is we're going to move on to a criminal investigation. Okay.
If I'm legally incapacitated, how can I be charged with it?
I'm not clear on what you mean by legally incapacitated.
I thought I was being legally incapacitated.
So based on the information provided to us again today, okay? So we've got your vehicle crash, you're striking a pedestrian, and the totality of the circumstances surrounding this entire event, you'll be found at fault for that, okay?
On cross, Assistant Public Defender Michael Schoenberg asked Officer Hill about what Michael had said to him.
So let's talk about the things that he kind of told you. He told you he was being chased.
Yes.
Correct. Obviously, in your investigation, you found no evidence of him being chased, correct?
No.
He told you he was rammed in the back from the back of the car, correct? Another
Yes.
car rammed him. Any indication of that on his vehicle or otherwise? No. Okay. He didn't know where he was?
He stated he did not know where he was.
I understand. He didn't know he was in an accident. At least that's what he told you, correct?
That's what he said, correct.
He didn't know that Officer French had to remove him from the car by gunpoint. Is that correct?
He never stated that.
He didn't recall being removed from his vehicle, did he?
That information was not stated either.
Now, he also told you that cars were blocking the gate. Is that correct?
I believe that was what he said.
Or I think it was, you correct me if I'm wrong, that he was blocking the exit. Or the exit was blocked, so we had to go through the gate.
I would have to review back on my notes for those specific details.
Okay.
But I believe there was an issue with blocking from his perspective.
Yes, sir. And he said the signs were covered. The signs for the exit were covered.
I couldn't tell you what signs that he was referring to.
Okay. But you didn't see any signs covered in the immediate traffic accident area?
No.
Okay. I know these sounds,
I understand.
but I have to ask those questions. Now, he told you, he said, if I'm legally incapacitated, I thought I was being legally incapacitated. That's what he said, correct?
Yes.
Any idea what that means?
No.
At the scene, the officers asked Michael if he would do a field sobriety test. Michael said no at first, but then he ended up doing some of the officers' exercises, like counting to 30 with his head tilted back and touching his nose. However, he refused to stand on a line or be drug tested. After the crashes, Michael's blood was sent to the Florida Department of Law Enforcement. Senior crime lab analyst Ryan Warner tested it for the presence of drugs. The blood test was taken about 11 hours after the crash. Warner had been trained and studied chemistry with a concentration in forensic science from Appalachian State University. He had worked at FDLE, Florida's statewide police agency, from 2006 to 2022. First, he ruled out alcohol. There was none found in Michael's blood. Then he tested for drugs.
So after the testing was concluded, I did find two drugs in this specimen. Methamphetamine at a concentration of 62 plus or minus 19 nanograms per milliliter, and amphetamine at a concentration of 25 plus or minus 7 nanograms per milliliter.
Michael Kraft's trial started in March 2025 in Seminole County, Florida. The fact that Michael had drugs in his system at the time of the crashes, meth and amphetamine, was undisputed. But while Assistant State Attorney Stuart Stone said Michael was guilty of a slew of charges, including 2 counts of DUI manslaughter and 2 counts of vehicular homicide, and that he deserved to spend the rest of his life in prison, Michael's attorney told the jury something else.
Mr. Kraft says, I was being chased. He didn't know where he was, and he thought people were trying to kill him. He was trying to get away. And I know it sounds crazy, because it is. That's the whole point. It's crazy. He was insane at the time.
I always tell myself I'm going to get better at meal planning. You know, I'm always so jealous of those people who can get all their ingredients together on a Sunday and then prep their family dinners for the week. And then they don't have to worry about it when the time comes. But what finally clicked for me is that some nights I have more time than others. Some nights I can actually cook a meal, but other nights I just need something to heat up or we just need dinner fast. Those nights are mainly when my daughter has soccer or Girl Scouts or ice skating. And that's why Marley Spoon works really well for us. They actually adapt with you and have options for all of it so that meals fit your schedule and not the other way around. And it still helps us eat well. Everything is chef-designed, made with quality ingredients, and balanced enough to feel good about. Marley Spoon has a wide range of ready-to-cook, ready-to-heat, and ready-to-eat options, as well as market items, to help you stock up on snacks and beverages for the between-meal moments. And Marley Spoon understands that we all eat differently. Your tastes, preferences, and interests, culinary or dietary, are always covered. Their meal selection is always evolving with fresh updates, offering something for everyone and letting you personalize every order. We recently made their vegetable enchiladas with black beans, corn, and spinach, and it was so delicious. What I love about Marley Spoon is how ridiculously easy it is, and how no matter which type of meal you choose, it tastes like you just made everything from scratch. Just last week, we got a little fancy with their garlic butter steak and creamed greens with roasted Parmesan potatoes, and it only took 30 minutes to make. Go to marleyspoon.com/offer/court for 45% off your first order and free delivery. That's right, 45% off your first order and free delivery. That's marleyspoon.com/offer/court. And court needs to be in all caps. marleyspoon.com/offer/court. Assistant Public Defender Michael Schoenberg argued that Michael was not guilty by reason of insanity. He told the jury that Michael had a long history of mental health problems, and that at the time of the incident, Michael thought he was being chased by the mafia on State Road 46. He said Michael hadn't slept in days and had more than $3,600 in cash on him. He was having delusions. He was also diagnosed with schizoaffective disorder, a mental health condition that combines schizophrenia with a mood disorder, such as depression or bipolar disorder. He said even as the police surrounded him after Michael's car stopped moving, Michael didn't even know he had been in a crash. The burden fell on the defense to prove that Michael was insane, and in his opening statements, the prosecutor pointed out that it was a high threshold of evidence to prove. If Michael Kraft was insane, he said, then why was he trying to hide his crimes as if he knew what he did was wrong?
When Mr. Kraft is first advised that he's under investigation for a crime, the very first thing he says to the officer is, if I am legally incapacitated, how can I be charged with anything? That's the first thing he says to the officer. That question to the officer shows the conniving, untruthful mindset of a person who knew what he just did was horrific, not an insane man. If he was truly insane, he would not say such a thing. I think you'll see from the evidence. There'll be no question that there was something mentally wrong with Mr. Kraft, that there's some mental issue, some mental defect. I think the evidence is going to be pretty clear that that exists. But once again, it's important for you to note, as we discussed during jury selection, that that's not what makes a person legally insane. There has to be that mental issue or mental defect that causes the person not to know the nature of their acts or its consequences. That mental defect alone is not legal insanity.
And so the main question for the jury, was Michael legally insane or was he impaired from his drug use? Arguing that he was an impaired driver, the prosecution called Bruce Goldberger, a University of Florida health forensic medicine director who had worked over 70,000 cases with state medical examiners. Dr. Goldberger had testified in some very high-profile criminal cases, including of the defendants Casey Anthony, George Zimmerman, and baseball pitcher Roger Clemens at his steroid use trial. At the time of Michael Kraft's trial, Dr. Goldberger was the president of the American Board of Forensic Toxicology.
If you ingest methamphetamine, it causes euphoria, this feeling of well-being. It causes your brain to maybe become hyper-vigilant or hyperactive. So you become more focused. But it also causes a loss of normal faculties, like you lose the appreciation of danger, for example. You can lose your normal faculties in regards to physical capabilities, like even walking and psychomotor skills that we have.
Dr. Goldberger reviewed the crash report, the law enforcement body cam footage, Michael's drug test results post-crash, the FDLE toxicology records, and witness statements.
Do you have an opinion whether the defendant, Mr. Kraft, was exhibiting the signs and indicators consistent with the person who was under the influence of the combined effects of methamphetamine and amphetamine to the extent that the normal faculties were impaired.
Yes, I do.
And tell the jury what that opinion is and what the basis of that opinion is.
My opinion is that the signs and symptoms and the driving pattern, all of the evidence in this matter are consistent with someone whose normal faculties were impaired by methamphetamine and amphetamine.
Dr. Ryan Hall took the stand for the defense to talk about Michael's state of mind and his long battle with mental health. Dr. Hall is a psychiatrist with quite the credentials: Georgetown, Johns Hopkins, a fellowship at Case Western Reserve in Cleveland. He had published 80 articles, and these days he's an assistant professor at the University of Central Florida's Medical School in Orlando. Dr. Hall was getting paid $300 an hour to testify for the defense. The defense brought that fact up early during Dr. Hall's testimony. It's unclear exactly how much he was making for his work, but Dr. Hall said he had spent a lot of time on the case. He visited Michael 3 times in the jail to meet with him.
So the first visit was in May, roughly about 2 months after the arrest, and there was concerns about his ability to work with his attorney. So I was out there looking more at his current mental state, his understanding of his charges. Was he able to function, understand, comprehend, and be ready to go to court to defend himself if he needed to be? At that time, I had concerns, and I think there was a competency hearing. I saw him again after he came back from a state hospital, again, just seeing has he improved and is he able to go back to court. And then the third time I saw him was just looking at the insanity issue.
So let's talk about that first visit. You said the purpose was competency. That first visit to the jail, about how far after the incident was that?
I believe it was about 2 months. I think it was like May 26-ish, somewhere in that ballpark. I may be a little off of the date, but it was about 2 months after his arrest.
And what was your findings on there? Whether he was psychotic, not psychotic?
I thought he was actively psychotic. And again, I'm not a mind reader, so I have to go a little bit off of what people say, what their behavior is in the interview room. But what he was reporting was that he was hearing voices. He had concerns that people were out to kill him or harm him. Specifically, he thought the Mexican mafia was after him. He also had some delusional beliefs that he was going to work with a billionaire family to prevent World War III. So there just seemed to be a lot of grandiose, paranoid ideas. And, you know, he seemed to have difficulty with some kind of basic fact things. For example, he said, you know, I've never met my lawyer. My lawyer's never come to talk to me. And having talked with you, I know you had tried to talk with him several times and he refused to go. So he just seemed to be paranoid, confused, not understanding what was going on, and didn't seem that he could work with his legal team.
And what was the purposes of that second interview?
I believe he was coming back from the state hospital, and sometimes it's just good to have somebody see him to make sure that, you know, how he is reported in the state hospitals, how he's doing back now in the jail again. And I thought he was much improved the second time I saw him. There were still some lingering delusions, and even the third time I saw him, there were still lingering delusions. But I, for the most part, thought that he was relatively intact. In terms of being able to work with his team, understand the consequences, appreciate some aspects of what was going on. But I think he got better each time I saw him the longer he was back on his medicines.
So let's talk about that third time you spoke with him. And the purpose of that, you said earlier, was to determine whether he was insane at the time of the crime.
Yes.
Okay. What were your ultimate findings?
And again, I want to be careful because ultimately decision's up to the jury, but I thought if you took his version of events as he was reporting it, it seemed consistent with somebody that was having a psychotic break, that his delusions of persecution seemed consistent with previous episodes of psychosis he had at other times where he's either had interactions with police or been Baker acted or been committed, and that he would meet criteria for an insanity defense, given his statements.
And what were the statements that he said to you, and what were the statements that you gleaned from the report that gave you cause to make your diagnosis?
Again, the family history talks about him getting very paranoid, very worried that people are after him. Some of the previous records, was I think emails or writing from him to state attorneys or federal officers saying the police are coming to get me, they're harassing me, they're surveilling me, they're reading my thoughts, and that was back in 2018. So he seemed to have a long chronic pattern of when he got psychotic of having similar type symptoms. The Mexican mafia seemed to be a little bit of a new wrinkle, but again, sometimes new concepts get brought into a delusion, and this was after the 2020 election where there was a lot of discussion about border issues and things like that. I don't know if that may have been why it did or didn't get brought into the delusion. He had been in other hospitals. He had recently stopped his medications. He had used meth, but he stated, I was using the meth because I was worried people were going to kill me and I wanted to stay awake. I was worried if I fell asleep, they were going to kill me. And again, people may use meth for a lot of reasons, and assuming his statement's accurate, it seemed like his delusion or his psychosis was why he chose to use meth that time. That he got very confused. He was having trouble using his phone to get GPS directions. He was trying to get to his sister that was in Orange City, but he was ending up in different parts of the state, that he hadn't slept for 3 or 4 days. Again, his fear of if I go to sleep, they're going to kill me. He talked about the car was beeping at him, and later when I saw him, he said in hindsight it was probably a lane collision or something note, but in that state he thought that was indications from the Mexican mafia that they were surveilling him or they were correcting him or they were trying to direct him on where to go. He said that he does not believe he hit the motorcycle. He thought the motorcycle was related to the mafia and that they intentionally ran into him. I wasn't there, so I can't comment on whether that's an accurate interpretation, but was what he believed happened. He said that he saw a access road that was covered by a gate, and for whatever reason in his delusional mind, he thought that would be a safe place where the Mexican mafia couldn't get to him, so that was his goal, and that he did a U-turn and then did another U-turn to try and get there. When I talked with him, he said, I don't remember hitting a pedestrian. So he said, I wasn't trying to hit a pedestrian. My goal was to get to safety because I thought people were after me and trying to kill me. And again, that seems somewhat consistent over the 3 evaluations I had with them.
Dr. Hall tried to piece together Michael's history as he dove into the health records and statements from Michael's family.
He has a pattern that is very common in folks with schizophrenia or long-term psychiatric illness. So he had been in mental health treatment at about age 10 to 13. There had been suicide attempts as an adolescent. There had been suicide attempts later in life. He had multiple hospitalizations and Baker Acts. One of the things that really stood out for him is he had actually been involuntarily committed, not due to crimes, but just due to a state of health, to McClenny State Hospital, which a lot of people may end up there, but usually it's after crimes or other things. But to be what's called the B32 suggests that he had a long-standing psychotic illness that couldn't be treated in just a simple psych hospital within a month or so. He spent about 10 months up at McClenny, that they, per his report, and I haven't seen other records to confirm, but that he was tried on a medicine called Clozaril, which is a very serious antipsychotic medication. It's one of our last ditch meds for psychosis because potential side effects is shutting down the bone marrow. So we don't prescribe that one casually because you got to get weekly blood draws, and if there's a bone marrow reaction, you got to stop it. It could lead to death otherwise. So he seemed to have a pattern that suggested significant psychiatric, psychotic history. Now, he also had a history of substance abuse, and that may be somewhat separate, but given that he was at McClenny for 10 months, theoretically not using substances and was still needing high-level medications, I thought that he had an independent psychotic history, and then again, there may be a drug abuse history as well.
On cross, Dr. Hall insisted he was objective when evaluating Michael.
Isn't it true that your ultimate opinion is that he could meet the criteria for insanity, correct?
Yes, in the sense that I'm not a mind reader. The jury has their job. I'm not trying to take over that job. In my opinion, he had a legitimate mental health issue. He was actively psychotic, that psychosis interfered with his ability to understand the wrongfulness, and to a certain degree, I think also had difficulty with him understanding the nature of things that occurred.
But
the jury will ultimately have to decide.
Right. But that could be. That's your opinion.
Sure.
And additionally, as part of that ultimate opinion, that he may not have known that his behavior was unlawful, correct?
Correct. And again, when I saw him 2 months later, he's saying, the evidence is fabricated. I never saw any bodies. I never saw any ambulances. I don't think this happened. So I don't think he really understood what happened or that he broke laws that day in that way.
Right, but that may not is what I'm asking you about, that he may not have known that his behavior was unlawful, correct?
Correct. And again, I very rarely say things as 100% definitive. As I said, I'm not perfect. I'm not a mind reader. The few things I will say is the sun will always rise in the east because the laws of physics dictate that. There's a lot about mental health that is open to interpretation. So my opinion, by a reasonable degree of medical certainty, is I think he meets criteria. It'll ultimately be up to the legal system to make that final conclusion.
There was no question that something was wrong with Michael Kraft, Assistant State Attorney Stuart Stone said in his closing arguments. But he argued that Michael knew what he did was wrong when he killed 2 people. He again reminded the jury the burden of proof fell on the defense to prove Michael was insane. By law, Michael was considered sane, unless the defense could prove otherwise, and he said the defense had failed to do that. He pointed out that even the defense's own expert, Dr. Hall, failed to definitively say that Michael was insane.
Dr. Hall never expresses the ultimate opinion that the defendant is legally insane. I'm going to talk more about that because I want to talk about Dr. Hall in a few moments. Once again, there's no question that there's something mentally wrong with the defendant when this occurred, when he killed Jenica and Vincent. But it's so important, I can't emphasize enough to keep in mind that a mental defect alone does not mean that a person is legally insane. The defect must be the cause of the person to not know that what he or she was doing, or the nature of his acts, or the consequences of his or her acts, or if he or she does, that it was wrong, that it was unlawful. You have to have that second part. So the mental defect, disease, that alone doesn't do it. And in some sense, Dr. Hall, he completely acknowledged that because we talked about the people when they're Baker Acted. A person could be Baker Acted 20, 50, 100 times. And that doesn't mean they're legally insane because the criteria is much different. Baker Act versus legal insanity. And we know someone who has been Baker Acted numerous times, there's something mentally wrong with them. But they're not insane.
Prosecutor Stone urged the jury to use common sense and find Michael, the man who acted like he was trying to hide his crimes by refusing to take drug tests and sobriety tests, guilty. "45 minutes. That's how long it took for the jury to convict Michael Kraft of all charges. He was found guilty of 2 counts of vehicular homicide, 2 counts of DUI manslaughter, and 2 counts of leaving the scene of a crash with a death. For the sentencing portion of Michael's trial, everyone was back in the courtroom. The jury learned more about Michael's mental health history, as well as more about the two victims, Vincent Russo and Jenica Campbell. Jenica's daughter said this about her mom.
My mom was my everything, my best friend, my rock, my protector. People always said we looked like twins. She was the kindest, sweetest, most outgoing person you would have ever met. She had a heart for helping others, whether it was handing out snacks or water to those in need, encouraging someone who was struggling or just needed a little encouragement. She loved her family, her church, arts and crafts, and every little moment she spent with us. She could brighten up a room with just her smile. She truly was the best person I've ever known.
And Vincent's daughter-in-law described how much he meant to their family.
Every day, the last 4 years, there's not a day that's gone by that we haven't remembered the pain of losing Dad.
The prosecutor asked for a life sentence. Michael's defense wanted a sentence of 15 to 20 years in addition to court-ordered supervision, so he could get the mental health treatment he needed. Michael briefly spoke in court, tearfully saying he was taking responsibility for his actions. Michael's family also testified, revealing his troubled biography, the deep family tree of mental health problems, and said there aren't enough resources available to help someone like him. He had fallen through the cracks. The following is from Michael's sister.
My brother has struggled for most of his life with severe mental illness and lives with schizoaffective disorder, a disease that impacts his thinking, behavior, and ability to make rational decisions. His suffering began very early. He attempted suicide when he was just 10 years old. He grew up in an abusive home, and he didn't have anyone to protect him. He struggled to make friends and to do well in school. Despite all of his difficulties, though, my brother was a kind, loving person who always looked out for me and stood up for what was right. Yet throughout his life, he has been cast aside, taken advantage of, and repeatedly failed by the systems that were set up to support him. Like so many other individuals struggling with mental illness and complex trauma, my brother turned to drugs as a means of coping, but this only exacerbated his mental illness. My family has spent years trying to get him help, petitioning courts, arranging hospitalizations, and doing everything we could to keep him safe and connected to treatment. At one point, he was discharged from a state hospital and should have been transferred to a supervised setting. Instead, he was pulled away to appear before a judge for a warrant tied to a mental health crisis months earlier. He was sent away from court with no medication, no ID, and no way to get back to treatment. From there, he spiraled. This is not to diminish the seriousness of his actions or to deflect responsibility. What happened was tragic and inexcusable, but I do believe that my brother's illness played a major role in the circumstances that led to this tragedy.
Mental health problems ran on both Michael's mother and father's side of the family. Michael's maternal great-grandfather had been committed to a state asylum for schizophrenia and spent 20 years institutionalized before he died. And a member on Michael's father's side had recently been diagnosed with schizoaffective disorder, the same condition as Michael. After taking it all in, Seminole Circuit Judge Michael Rudsill said he couldn't imagine a worse crime. Siding with the prosecution, he ordered Michael to serve 5 concurrent life sentence terms. Jenica Campbell's family has started a GoFundMe account and has raised more than $60,000. I'll include the link in the show notes in case you decide you'd like to help. And that's all for this episode. This episode was researched and written by Gabrielle Rusin. To hear these episodes without the ads, or to hear Court Junkie additional bonus episodes, check out my Patreon options at courtjunkie.com/support. Thanks again for listening. Until next time.
At Pluto TV, we're celebrating Black History Month with our free curated collection of Black entertainment.
No ifs, ands, or buts about it.
Catch award-winning films like Dreamgirls, Monsters Ball, and Selma.
We must make a massive demonstration.
Iconic hits like School Days and Set It Off. Plus full seasons of shows like Tyler Perry's Sisters and Power.
I got you.
It's star-studded, brilliant Black entertainment, and it's all free.
It's getting good.
This month and always on Pluto TV. Stream now, pay never.